Hi, folks. Nice to see
Uh,
you all. Hey, many familiar faces and some new faces. It's wonderful to see you all. Happy New Year. We weren't together in January because of the holiday. This is our first time convening in 2026. Crazy. It feels like a lot has already happened. Life just seems full these days. Um, But I wanted to start this meeting by actually sharing a few updates about this group. Many of you were so kind as to complete a survey about this group in the fall. So thank you for doing that and sharing your perspectives about its value and what could be improved and what we'd like to do together in 2026. So that was really wonderful to review. And Umbreen and I met and went through them. And some of the things that came out of them were that people enjoy kind of a combination of clinical case discussions, discussing sort of practical or operational details about how to do this work, and then hearing about research projects and ways that they can get involved, including ways they can get involved in collaborative works. So that was good to know that there's sort of interest in that broad range of things. So we're going to continue to toggle between those topics. Um, Throughout the year. People also asked for more of a heads up about what topics we're going to cover at each of our monthly visits or meetings, so that they can prepare and prioritize clearing their schedule for meetings they really want to join. So you might have noticed in my email that I sent out earlier this week, I tried to do exactly that. Oops, this is not the email I'm meaning to share. It is a different email I'm meaning to share. Um, Oh, chat. Oh, I lost the email I was meaning to share. Okay. Well, you might have noticed, and I'll find the email, that I sent out in my email earlier this week here it is. Um, a little bit of a heads up about what we're talking about this week, as well as in upcoming meetings in March and April, which have been scheduled. And then there's an additional range of conversations that we are working on scheduling. Um, And as I look at these, it reminds me that people did want to hear more about psychosocial aspects of care. They feel like those are really important aspects of the work we do, and we don't talk about them enough. So we purposely scheduled a couple conversations on those topics. People wanted to talk about practice models and clinical operations, so we'll get that scheduled. People wanted to talk about how they can get involved in advocacy work. So we're going to hear from the ALS Association, ALS Network, IMALS, and some other organizations about advocacy work that we might be able to participate in. And we also wanted to find a time to hear from other sort of similarly minded working groups about what they're doing and think about how we can synergize. And we'll also keep the case discussions and other stuff, works in progress, going. So just wanted to give you a heads up that if you want more information about what's to come, it's in my email and I'll keep that going. And people also said, asked if we could make it easier to find past meetings, recordings of past meetings, and Gail is working on that. She has been posting those past meeting recordings in on a YouTube channel, but we'll also post them on our INPCS TradeWing platform as past meetings to make it a little easier to find all those cataloged. Um, Other things to say. Oh yeah, AHPM is coming up next month. As some of you may know, this is the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine's annual assembly. It's March 3rd, 4th through 7th in San Diego. If anyone's going and would like to meet up for a little happy hour on Friday, March 6th, that would be really fun. We're having a neuropalliative care special interest group meeting on Friday from 5 to 5:45, and I'd like to propose that we go straight from there to a brief happy hour if you'd like to. So I don't know if anyone will be there. Let me know if so. Yay, okay, great. Because it would be really fun just to have some time together in real life to connect. And also, I'd welcome you to join the neuropalliative care SIG if you haven't already. Any questions about any of that? All right. And one final idea is as in an effort to try to get to know each other and build community, we had this idea of putting ourselves into breakout rooms for just a few minutes at the start of each of these meetings to kind of just schmooze and introduce ourselves to other members of this group and sort of simulate the experience of like walking into an in-person meeting and saying hi and getting to know folks. So we'd like to try that today, if you don't mind. We're just going to take a few minutes. And sorry that it's short, but we're going to come back together in order to, I'll hand it off to Umbreen, and she's going to lead us in a conversation about brainstorming some abstract ideas for the upcoming meetings over the course of the year and how we can collaborate in that. So, Gail, do you want to put us in breakout rooms? Hi. I know that was brief, but I certainly enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I met someone new, so that was awesome. And Umbreen, I'll hand it right over to you.
Cool. Um, yeah, definitely not enough time. I think all of us love each other enough that we want to spend like I bet the whole hour talking to each other. But so the hope today was that we can serve as a brainstorming session. In keeping with the like kind of the mission of our group, I think, or the purpose of our group as a melting pot across different organizations where we're all going to be going to represent. Like I know I'm not an AAN member, but there are many AAN members here, and vice versa for AHPM, et cetera. Sharing ideas and cross collaborating in a space that we can to help kind of extend our mission across the other organizations would be kind of part of what we're hoping to achieve. So, with the mindset that in the next every time, we've got the hope was that we could brainstorm ideas today on project ideas that we as a group would like to be part of and work on, whether that's small groups, outside this meeting that then can break off and then meet together and then bring those ideas back to the group for input and collaboration, et cetera. Um, and also maybe the hope is that some of these will then be developed into abstracts for conferences across the different organizations. So um, obviously brainstorming and creating ideas for conferences this year isn't going to happen, but for the following year and then for the maybe the year after. Remembering also for those who may not be familiar with the processes of abstract submission that it's quite often they often call for abstracts soon after the conference. So WHPM will be, in March, and then call for abstracts come usually a couple months after that. So that's why it can be kind of difficult to do these kinds of brainstorming sessions at the conference itself. But if we can kind of use this platform for that, that's the hope. Go ahead, Cara, please.
Great. And I just thought it might be helpful to hear as an example. There are a group of people who put together an abstract sort of for AHPM. It's an educational session done by an interdisciplinary and multi-center group that's about ease your neurophobia, sort of clinical tips from neuropalliative care experts to ease your neurophobia. And we're talking about a few different topics. We're talking briefly about ALS and sort of what are the key pearls that hospice and palliative medicine providers of all disciplines might need to know about ALS to take care of this population. And we're talking briefly about movement disorders and what hospice and palliative medicine providers need to know about that, and then about seizures at the end of life, and finally, psychosocial, spiritual, and existential aspects of care. So it's a lot to pack into one educational session. Maybe kind of laughable for that reason, but we're going to do it. And it's sort of with the goal of just providing continuing education to hospice and medicine providers about caring for neurologic populations and hopefully making them feel a little bit more confident and competent in doing that. So that's an example of an abstract we submitted together in July, because that's when abstracts get submitted for presentation this March. So, we'll have an opportunity next July to submit other abstracts for AHPM, for example.
And Kellen, for example, put in the chat that there are obviously abstract submissions for AANEM. And so thinking about kind of which conferences, I think it's going to be important as a group to think about which conferences are you attending. Like, I'm not attending that one, so it wouldn't have been on my radar at all. And between us as a collective group, there are so many conferences and opportunities that I think there could be quite a lot of opportunity. Like there is a lot of opportunity for people to take leads on different things
Hmm.
across different. So like if someone's going to AANEM, and let's say we're all part of one group, like it's five of us, and one of us is going to AANEM, that could be that person's presentation for that. And often we can submit abstracts to different organizations, to different conferences, and even if it's been accepted elsewhere. So just thinking about opportunities for everyone. Um, and so I wanted to put out there some big topic ideas to get us kind of thinking about it. Um, and then we'll split up into different groups. I think to try this, it might be easiest to actually, one option is to break up by which conferences you're interested in submitting to. Um, the other option is to break up by topic. It just kind of depends on which. I'm not sure if everybody uh, like. I'm not sure the fastest way to do it in the sense of figuring out who wants to. Like by topic might be easier. Uh, by
I
topic,
guess
okay.
I would say meeting just because like um I don't know, I think there might be a lot of topics. I'm interested in hearing people's ideas for topics, but there might be sort of innumerable. Whereas there's a few conferences like, you know, I know I'll go to AHPM and I'd like or I'd be open to, thinking about an abstract for that conference. I don't know.
Okay.
I could see it going either way, but
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, I don't know the list of conferences, so I think it's going to be a little bit challenging. I guess we can make one by AAHPM, definitely one for INPCS, maybe one for AANEM that was suggested. Um, is there any other conference that's really
and maybe
important?
the AANEM group could also think about AAN because that could be kind of a group of neurologists who go to neurology conferences and want to think about whether there's any palliative care topics they'd like to talk about. Whereas there
You
could be a
know,
separate group of people who go to AHPM, which is a palliative care conference, and want to talk about a neuropalliative care topic there. Does that make
Nunu was
sense?
going to say something. He came off mute.
No, it was just an accident.
Oh, just kidding. Okay. So in trying to be mindful of our time and giving as much time, we're going to try to do breakout sessions for I'd say 20 minutes and then come back for the last 20 minutes. Um, yeah. So Catherine, if you want to try to, or I guess let me put here WHPM, INPCS, AAN/AANEM. Even if you're not going, possibly consider if you
Yes.
find it you have that expertise. Obviously remember that you don't have to be the one who's going to present or something like that. You could be one of the people on the on the topic, or on
Mhm.
the abstract still. um,
Yeah, Kathy, I
is
think
there
you'd have a
any
lot
other
to.
conference
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
very
sounds good. And
important?
I just said about the ALS MND meeting in Amsterdam. I'll be going to that conference.
Yeah, there's the MND one. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Niels.
Um,
Okay, perfect. So let's do 5 groups. I'm just gonna be brave and put those out there. Um, I would think about, but for your different groups, I would think about um, priorities based on, like, Niels. I know the priority is research, right? So like thinking about how to get neuropalliative care into more research versus maybe WHPM is thinking about, well, Kara's here, so she can speak, but about their priorities in terms of, integrating or providing, palliative care physicians, or sorry, multidisciplinary groups with neuro slash ALS knowledge, whether that's research or initiatives, is kind of across the board there. So think those are just examples, but think about kind of what your organization's priorities are. Kara, please.
One other thing I wanted to mention, when Umbreen and I met earlier this week and we were talking about plans for this group, another thing we talked about that was inspired by your surveys was at INPCS doing a pre-conference where we all kind of share what work we're doing in this area, the intersection of palliative care and ALS, and hear from people about, I'm doing this educational work, I'm doing this research study, I'm interested in doing this project, but I haven't really gotten started. And I'm sort of having like a big works in progress session and then a brainstorm about what might we do together, or what would we like to prioritize over the next, year, 2 or 3. So we did want to propose that pre-conference idea for INPCS. And if people have additional thoughts about that or other sessions they'd like to present at INPCS, we're all ears.
I put a few topics to consider in the just to maybe get your brains rolling. And I think this actually is a good point for us to break into 20-minute groups. And then, Gail, will there be note-taking possibility in each one of those like you have right now? Like the AI, is it recording in the breaks?
Don't know how it does. I don't know how Zoom does the breakout room AI or not. I've
Okay.
not had to do
So
that.
someone take notes, please, in each group. And then plan to come back. We're going to come back and talk to each other and share ideas. I bet there'll be a lot of cross ideas. Like, I bet there'll be overlap. So then we can kind of figure out who wants to take lead on certain things. Okay.
Great. So you'll be able to pick which conference that you want to go to, and that's the room you're going to pop into. So here you go.
Okay, so I think if we could if maybe one person from each group would be willing to share a couple of key ideas, and then what we'll do is, hey, Cara, we can with our notes afterward. What I often find is helpful is it takes a little time for all this to percolate, and we can send out like the ideas, and then people can kind of sign up to work together to develop the projects or develop whatever it is you have in mind, and meet kind of separately outside the working group. Does that sound okay? And we'll send a follow-up email, and if anybody wants to kind of lead that initiative or whatever, that we'll also ask for folks to sign up for that by email after this, so you have some time to decide if you want to commit to something else on your plate. Let's start with, how about we start with the WHPM group, and maybe keep it to like 2 or 3 minutes, if that's okay?
I can speak on behalf of our group if that's okay, because I took notes. It was a wonderful group. We didn't finish our conversation, lots of ideas that we need to get into further, but we talked about how there might be great value to doing an educational session at AHPM, realizing that a lot of the people who go to that conference are frontline palliative care and hospice clinicians that may not feel fully comfortable yet caring for people with ALS. So we talked about how we might just do a simple educational talk, sort of clinical pearls for caring for people with ALS. And the sections within that might be practical strategies for communication with this population, and what are these AAC devices. We might want a speech therapist to present this section. Then we talked about assessing cognition and capacity in ALS, because I think a lot of us may not recognize or know much about the cognitive impacts of the illness and how to manage those. We talked about respiratory equipment and the difference between non-invasive ventilation and BiPAP. What is a cough assist device? How can it be helpful for symptom management? And then we talked about like advocacy, both making sure hospice and palliative medicine clinicians know about supportive services like the ALS Association and ALS Network care managers, the support groups, the loan closets, Medicare benefits, VA benefits, etc. That people with ALS are eligible for, and then also talk about like sort of providing anticipatory guidance on the trajectory of the illness and how important it can be to help people prepare in advance of when they have to face big decisions about their care or when they may need equipment, especially since equipment can take a long time to obtain. And then a sort of subtext of what we might want to communicate through this talk is like, this is a very meaningful population to serve, and we in hospice and palliative medicine should step up and care for this population. So we kind of wanted that to come through throughout. And then we also talked about a second talk that might be about specialty aligned palliative care for people with non-cancer serious illnesses. And we could talk about how we've sort of set up these specialty aligned palliative care clinics for people with ALS, but we could also have people talk about how they have specialty aligned palliative care for people with heart failure or people with chronic kidney disease, and kind of more clinical operations about how things to think about when you're setting up a specialty aligned palliative care clinic. So that was the second idea for an educational session at AHPM.
Awesome. Okay. Maybe we'll go to AAN/AANEM next.
So there was only two of us, so our talk was very efficient in terms of communication. But Kelly and I got really excited about maybe basically creating, and we're not sure if this would be better as like a little workshop, because you can submit a workshop to AAN. Sometimes they're desperate for a neuromuscular topic, so maybe they would think of this as neuromuscular, versus kind of more like a little clinical tool of pocket cards, basically. And basically we were thinking, if you could take some of the resources like EPEC-N and top 10 palliative tips, and you could do like either surveys or maybe little focus groups of people living with ALS, of neurologists, of palliativists, and just distill it. Like if you are a clinician and you understand and believe in the basic broad philosophies of palliative care, but you don't know like what to say or how to implement it. You've been to the talks, but you're not going to run a whole family meeting. You're just trying to think of how to phrase one thing. If we could make like little pocket cards of tools, like if the first line SSRI fails, like what maybe would be your second line, or like what are just a little reminder of like common stuff that people complain about for those of us that aren't doing a lot of antidepressant management in our usual clinic setting. Or if you had to pick, like, instead of doing the whole FOCK-IT, because they're probably not going to do an entire spiritual assessment scale, if there's just one way that you like to phrase and feel out how patients feel about like spiritual approach, what would it be? And like, here's the triangle of comfort, function, longevity. Like here's a triad, a visual you can just pull out and point to if you're not quite sure how to phrase, or this is one tool you're going to take with you. So we were kind of just thinking if we had like a little reference on the back of each card and just picked like 10 cards, and had people use them. You could do like a little education session and just give out the cards. It could be basically like the most top, highest yieldest things ever for neurologists working with ALS patients that was, vetted by a group of lived experts, palliative experts, et cetera. That could be kind of cool. And you'd have a little bit of survey data that's easy to do in a year. So yeah, that was our thought. And then our other little thought was maybe, and this is a longer term project, like looking at how to do like a prognostic communication tool that had a visual. Like here is the uncertainty, spread early in the course. Here's the ceiling, the best you can hope for, at year 3 or whatever. Here's the floor, like your likelihood of maybe mortality. Just a visual scale, kind of looking at early, middle, and late that incorporates things like the NCALS model, things that are like really nice, high tech, but maybe not so great for somebody that's not very literate in like probability curves, right? It's a little bit too high tech, I think, for many of our patients. So what if you just had something a little more like some of the bedside models that are being piloted in the stroke populations that look at how the team thinks about ceiling and floor kind of prognostic outcomes as they change over time and the uncertainty window narrows. So I think there's some cool stuff that could be done there, but it might be a little bit too big for a 1-year abstract submission. So those were, I think, our two big things.
Awesome. Love it. Maybe I'll go next. We talked about INPCS with Jerry and Christy and Amy. Couple of immediate ideas were, so really the big topic of mental health and support therapy options for patients and care partners. And the couple of ideas were things about at least starting with surveys to understand what are existing mental health services available across the country, what are people using in their clinics, both as the clinicians and then also as the patient and care partners. Probably the patient and care partners have more insights and resources than the clinicians do. And so doing a couple of surveys to start out to gather the data, and then ultimately maybe even partnering with INPCS to see if maybe we want to develop a course for social workers to train them and get education and certification on caring for people with ALS, and that way social workers who aren't necessarily already embedded in the ALS clinic, but could be, we can tap into our social work team members who are not necessarily specific for even neurology can be recruited to help. And then one of the big things that came up was kind of partnering with the organizations, IMALS, and I just attended the ALS Association Roundtable a couple weeks ago, and the conversation was around loneliness and connections. And so how can we, there are a lot of national programs that exist through these organizations of matching, like one-on-one individuals who have lived experiences, unfortunately, either as former patient care partners or as even family, loved ones. They don't necessarily have to be care partners, who are serving as kind of like advisors and walking people through. And so can we kind of help to develop either like a national registry of those, figuring out a way to connect people on a national scale, which is a huge project and would be really a long-term idea. But some of these initial steps that I just talked about could serve as foundations. And then MND, want to go next?
Thank you. Yes, I took some notes. We had a group with Lori McFarnon from the ALS Association, Ashley Lee, a family member of a former ALS patient and currently in school in psychology. We had Susan Pennock, who's the Care Services Manager for ALS Northwest Group, and then Joe Green, Director of Spiritual Care and Bereavement for Chicago. And we talked about two main ideas for submission for July 2026. One is to help Joe rework an abstract that seemed very interesting, comparing the incidence of sudden death in breast cancer, heart disease, and ALS. And the incident of sudden death was 3 times higher in ALS compared to the others, and talked about the need to raise awareness about that people can just die very suddenly, and also just thinking about just basically how to prepare people for that. And he has a lot more data than he had for the time of the abstract, which was 47 patients. So we talked about working with him to hopefully help that get accepted this year. And then the other main thing we talked about that Ashley brought up is the idea of she put together a talk for the Paralyzed Veterans American Conference about spirituality is everyone's business, and talking about how it's not just something for the chaplain to talk about and consider, but everyone on the team to consider, and to think about maybe a way to access some of the data that's already collected. Lori reminded me that we have this new ALS focus survey data that's available from the ALS Association. 4,500 people participated in the largest survey done for ALS so to date. And the two questions specifically asked were about genetic counseling and testing, and the other was about social interaction patterns, preferences, and barriers. And then they have clinical information that's de-identified to be able to correlate. So you could say, okay, for
chicken sandwich combo with the Dr. Peppers.
Pardon?
Oh, I think it was just a background noise.
Oh, sorry.
Somebody's awesome lunch order.
So we thought
Yes.
maybe we could look and see if there's information in that in this data set. And I can send this to disseminate to everyone because it's free and available for everyone. But in each year they think about new questions to ask. So yeah. I thought it seemed like a very exciting data set to potentially be able to get information either to use directly in an analysis to think about presenting at the meeting, or to get the data to then prompt a survey or other research based on the data. So I thought that was exciting. So those are the two main things we talked about.
Beautiful, thank you. And then last but not least is Niels.
Hi, everyone. There were three of us in the Niels group. Actually, our main focus was actually trying to figure out how to get our foot in the door at Niels as we were talking. I had the fortunate experience of sitting on the abstract review committee this past year, and there are a lot of great palliative oriented abstracts being submitted, but all those abstracts are automatically considered for posters. So we weren't sure kind of like how you would think about proposing a workshop or a talk, because that seems to be outside of like the typical application window. So that was one challenge, but we did want to, I would personally encourage everybody to submit as much as they can to Niels that is palliative adjacent or symptom management related, because I think that continues to show that there's a need and an interest in this topic. And then we'd also talked, Anne-Marie and I, about maybe trying to promote some sort of like, what is the state of the science for palliative care in ALS, and care that may be related to the paper that I know that you're heading up, and kind of what is the science for specialty palliative care, and integrating that into a workflow, and kind of maybe somehow finding a way to suggest that as a talk, whatever kind of backdoor method you have to do that. So. Niels, the name is actually changing from Northeast ALS Consortium to the Navigating Excellence in ALS.
Network
for Excellence in ALS. Yes.
Yes.
Because they're acknowledging that this is no longer a community that's just in the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I am very impressed that everyone was able to share their ideas within 2 to 3 minutes, and we actually finished. I think what we'll do is, as I said, send out a summary. If anybody's interested in working on specific projects or leading, could you please email Cara and I and let us know? Like, I would be very interested in helping, like, leading this mental health thing. Maybe I'm going to drag in Christy and Amy for sure, and you're kind of being voluntold. But for example, so if there's any other folks who know that they're going to probably at least help to kind of get things going, can you please send us that email, and then we can put it out there and hopefully make some projects happen for the coming year. And remember that we have the working group as a place to kind of present and get more help in the future, so you're not just alone out there by yourself. Amy, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking, since it's kind of a new group, and we're all getting to kind of know each other, it might be nice if you compile just short biographies of each of us, so we can kind of be reminded of who's interested in what and who does what.
I think we do have, I know we have a membership, like kind of registry and online just also. It's a nice idea. I think on the website, on our trade wing, there's also like a listing of who is where, at least. It doesn't have a bio, but it just has our names at least, and who is where. I've definitely looked there before. But Cara, I think we have a registry of people.
We have a list. We
have like a list.
We don't have bios. We could do that. Gail could send out like a brief little Qualtrics where people could enter a little information about themselves. I imagine some people would and some people wouldn't, but
right.
And we're always growing and morphing, but it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I just want to briefly remind people, if you're going to AHPM next month in March, let me know. I'll be glad and delighted to meet up with people in person. And we're not going to have our monthly meeting in March because it falls on AHPM. And many of us will be away. And then in April, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, for our monthly meeting, Jill Goslinga, an ALS specialist at UCSF, is going to talk about a study she's planning regarding management of fatigue in ALS, and she would really welcome our input on that as a works in progress session. And Umbreen is going to talk about the latest version of our palliative care for ALS resource website that she's been working diligently on. So it would be great to lend Umbreen input on that too. And then in May, Greg Merrill, who's a social worker, will be talking about acceptance and commitment therapy and how it can be applied to ALS. And I think that'll be a really high yield clinical talk. So stay tuned for other upcoming stuff, and wonderful to see you all.